Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is Using Volunteers in the Office with Church360 Members. This is an overview webinar, and while we'll cover everything, we're going to focus specifically on this topic of utilizing volunteers in the church to help with tasks that are usually done by the office staff. My name is Peter Frank. I'm the Senior Manager of Concordia Technology Solutions, and I've been with our group here at CTS for going on 6 years now. I've been here at the publishing house, Concordia Publishing House, our parent company, for a little over 10 years now. Started off in our retail area and moved into software and marketing a few years ago. So I really enjoyed being involved with this product. I've been involved with it pretty much since the beginning. And so it's a great joy for me to share with you how to use it in many different ways. I also use it personally with my home congregation, and so you'll hear me tie it back to that quite a few times today. So that's where I got a lot of the ideas for this presentation, was from using it in my home church. All right, so my contact information is on the screen. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. You can also call my office number. I'm not usually in my office, so it usually goes to voicemail, but if you happen to catch me at one of those times where I'm not leading a webinar or in a meeting, I'd be happy to talk with you. So please feel free to reach out at any time. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First off, I'm planning about 50 minutes for presentation, and I say that, and I probably should say 55 or 60. Even though we've got an hour planned, I'd like to leave a little bit of time for question and answers, so I set aside about 10 minutes. If you have questions, please go ahead and ask them. I've got the screen up here that shows me how many are in my queue. If I don't have a lot in the queue, then I'll go past that 50 minutes because there's more than enough information to share. And I can always dive into some things that are not in my outline too. Now, we are recording this webinar. It will be shared. If you are watching the recording, thank you for joining us after the fact. I'm sorry you couldn't be here live, but the only downside is that you don't get to ask questions live. So my contact information is still valid for you as well. A little bit about us. This is part of Concordia Technology Solutions. Like I mentioned before, we are the church administration division of Concordia Publishing House. We've been developing software for churches since 1984, which is quite a long time if you ask me. When I think about what software was like, not even in the 80s, in the 1990s, it has come a very long way. So here we are in 2018, talking about software that you can use actively on your mobile device. When we started building software years ago, mobile devices were not even something that was in our minds. So Church360 Members is the topic of discussion today. Now, it's part of the Church360 suite, and that is a suite of 3 products, Members being the primary one, with Unite, our church website builder, and Church360 Ledger, our finance software, being kind of the secondary pieces. And I say it's primary because everything else really revolves around people. And in the church, sharing the gospel with people is our primary goal. So Members integrates with Unite from a person perspective, where you can build up your directory on your website, have people interact. And with Ledger, integrates offerings that people give. So it's kind of the core product that we have here. It's the one that's been around the longest, and my personal favorite because of how much we can do with it. And that's what I'll be showing you today. So Church360 Members, if you are not familiar with it, is online church management software, where you manage your people, your attendance, your offerings, and all of those things that kind of go along with that. We'll be touching on each of those today. Just a few highlights of Church360 Members. It is mobile accessible, meaning that while not everything functions on your phone, the things that you would want to do on your phone are available to you, and that's looking up contact information, adding notes and pastoral visits, viewing the calendar and all of the events associated with that. We allow you to import your data, so if you are considering coming, I know some of you are already customers and have been customers for many years, you imported your data or entered it yourself. If you're thinking about joining, we can do that for you and help you out with that. We offer daily backups and free support and training included with your contract. So there's a lot of advantages to joining Church360 Members if you're here considering that. So I'm making a few assumptions about you as attendees. First off, I'm assuming you're familiar with the concept of church management software, if not Church360 Members itself. If you are familiar with it, I'm assuming you're new. If you are a longtime user, there's definitely things you'll pick up from here, but some of this will be basic for you. Kind of starting at ground zero in a few of these places, so feel free to pay attention as much as you can to learn it. If you are brand new, you're going to see a lot of great stuff. I also assume you're extremely busy. That's why we record it. So if you have to step away, that's totally fine. The recording will be shared later on. So these are the assumptions that I make about you, but there's a few things I can't make assumptions about. And so this is where I'd like you to tell me a little bit about yourself. Now I have a few polls that I'm going to put out here. The first one is about your role at the church. So let me go ahead and launch that. If you don't mind letting me know which option most closely describes your primary role. I know we all wear many hats within the church, so this is specifically your primary role, even if you have multiple ones. All right, so thank you very much. Looks like we've got quite the mix. At this point, no pastors in the group, but administrators, financial managers, and called church workers. So thank you very much for answering that. My next one, and this will really help tailor the discussion because we offer this up to everybody, but if you could let me know if you are already using Church360 Members in your congregation. So if you are, the follow-up question will be for you. So I'm guessing based on what I was looking from a registration level, most of you were. Looks like we've got some that aren't, so that's good. Still, the majority are currently using it, so that'll be good. So for those of you who are new to it, don't worry, you'll be able to pick up, but I probably won't start at ground zero for everything. All right, the last one, for those of you who are using it right now, what is your skill level, or what would you consider your Church360 members' skill level to be? Expert, advanced, intermediate, novice, or a newbie? All right, looks like we've got really the second half. So quite a few intermediates, a few novice, and newbies. So very good. All right, well, thank you very much for allowing me to ask you those questions, get a better idea of who is here today. That's very helpful to me as I go in and present. All right, the outline for today. There we go. We're going to do an overview of Church360 members. That'll be very brief in terms of kind of our goals behind it. I'll reference these goals as I talk through the different features, so it'll kind of help tie it all together. We'll do the tour of the software. I've got an outline of how to use volunteers for these different tasks, and I'll show that to you in a few minutes. Lastly, we'll do question and answers, like I said. We've got some time planned for that. So please ask questions throughout as we go. I'd be happy to answer them. Most of them will be at the end, but if I see them and I can answer them midstream, I'll do that too. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the goals of Church360 members first. So as we built it, we had a number of things in mind. First off, focusing on people. This is a database. We know that it's data, but the thing behind the data are real people. And in the church, it's painfully obvious that we are dealing with sinful human beings who need to hear the gospel. That's all of us. And so as we built Church360 members, we keep that in mind, that this is all about sharing the gospel to the children of God. And so keeping the focus on people helps us remember exactly why we're doing this, that we're building it for people to use, so it needs to be user-friendly and intuitive. So that's our primary goal. Next up, we hope to bring data to light. It truly is a database. There's plenty of data in here. For most people, I would not, I very much love data. Most people are not like me. So we want to help you bring data to light without you having to dig for it. Whoops, wrong direction. There we go. Turning information into insight. We know that a software cannot make recommendations for you on how to share the gospel, but we can help you turn information into insight into how to share the gospel in your ministry. And so that's why we call it turn information into insight. So that's another one of our goals. We hope to give you access where and how you need it. And this really goes into the accessibility, but it also goes into the topic for today with volunteers, is that while you may not need access to it, if you are a church worker, you may not need access to it from home because you've spent all day at church, but if you're a volunteer or you're delegating tasks to volunteers, they'll need to have access when and where they need it. And being web-based, being available on your mobile device, all of that goes into allowing these tasks to get done when and where they need to be done. All right, the last one, and this really goes into a number of different areas, is we provide the building blocks, not the blueprint, meaning there are many different ways to manage your church. In fact, every church is completely unique in how they manage it. While we may be, we have plenty of people in the same church body, each church operates differently, and so we can't create a one-size-fits-all solution. But what we can do is we can give you the tools to build it up the way you need. And so you'll see that with many of our different things like tags or custom fields, or even how we allow you to create your own calendars or with different naming conventions. So all of that is to give you the blueprint, or to give you the building blocks, not the blueprint, not the specific laid out path for you. All right, topic for today, using volunteers in the office. 4 key areas that we're going to be looking at. And these are based off of mainly my experience at my home church, although I've talked to many customers, many other church workers, and this goes in line with how they use it. Not all in this exact way, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up ideas from these different items here on how you can use it in your church. So the 4 that we're going to be looking at, and your names may be a little different than what I put. First off, the office clerk, who does the more monotonous things that are super important for keeping track of things, but take time away from your administrative assistant or your secretary or office manager, if that's what you have in your church. And so this is the volunteer who can do things like enter attendance for you. Board of Stewardship, and I question how to put this one in because I think often that this really goes to a number of different people, but in our church it's stewardship, thinking about people's time and talents, keeping good records of everybody. This may start off with the secretary who enters in the new members, or with the attendance, the office clerk who enters in the attendance. We'll kind of go through that, building out the stewardship side of membership. Board of Elders, this could also be the pastor, but as we're talking about volunteers and lay people, I put Board of Elders there for pastoral visits. This doesn't mean visits that just the pastor takes, but visits in the realm of pastoral care. And so that can be outside of the role of the pastor, but in support of the ministry. So Board of Elders, we'll look at pastoral visits. I use this a lot as a member of the Board of Elders at my church. And finally, the Board of Finance. Now, this may be an office clerk, it may be your church secretary who does this, but I know in many churches, including my own, the Board of Finance works to enter the offerings and manage the funds. So, of course, they're lay people, volunteers, and it's a great use of their skill set to be able to faithfully manage the funds of the congregation. So that is kind of our outline for today. There will be other things that we'll touch on as we go through it. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch things over. There we go. Make sure that's up and running. All right. So if you are brand new to Church360 Members, I'm going to touch on this briefly. You can see that we have a top navigation and a big table right off the bat. Now, this is rather small. There's a lot of information showing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and you can do that as well. If you find that it might be hard to see, that might be a little too much. I'll go to 125. If you have trouble seeing anything, let me know. I can always zoom in more. It's just really large when we get too far. So this top navigation has our 5 key areas: people, events, attendance, offerings, and reports. Since most of you are users, I'm going to go through this rather quickly. On the far right, we've got notifications and collections and admin. We'll touch on a few of those things. This is the tools that are important to get set up, but you don't use as often as these ones over here on the left. And then finally, user and settings. So what I want to focus on really today is these key areas over here: people, events, attendance, offerings, and reports. That's really serves as the basis for all the data that goes in, and that's where you'll spend most of your time. Now, as you go throughout, you may see these little beacons. I mentioned before we started, at least maybe even during the webinar, this is a new database for us. And when I say new database, I literally mean the data that we brought into this. It's got up-to-date information, and we don't have a lot of pictures in here yet. We'll be doing that as part of our presentation today. But you'll see these little beacons because it's a new account for us that when you click on it, give helpful information. So if this is the first time you're using Church360 Members, you'll see those throughout. We also down here in the lower right have our information center, which is where you can get helpful information, look at our articles, send our team a message. A message could be for anything. It doesn't just have to be support questions. It could be training questions or ideas and suggestions. Send it on to our team. It gets forwarded on to everybody on our team, from the marketing side to the development side. Our programmers see these as soon as it's submitted. All right, let's dig into the outline for today. So we're going to start by going up to events. Now, in my mind, really the first point of contact that you would have with somebody would be at a worship service. That's typically how it goes. Now, we know in the body of Christ, we are talking with our neighbors and our friends and inviting them in to come to our church. But at least with the relationship with the church, specifically attending an event, most often worship, sometimes an outreach event, fellowship event, maybe Bible study. All of that's kind of the same here in Church360. They're all events. Now, your events show up on a calendar. And let me go to February so it can be a little bit brighter, because you'll see that after an event day ends, some things kind of get grayed out. We've got this dark purple color that's kind of shows up as a light purple here, and still is readable. But here is our February calendar. And this has a number of different things, a number of different calendars to it. So when you click on calendars, you can see all of the different options that are available here. Now, this is part of our database. You can always add more calendars. So let's say we want to go up here. We'll go to calendars, and we'll add a new calendar called Communion. And I'll show you what that means in a second. We've already got a worship calendar. We'll do communion, and we'll do a dark red. All right, so now we'll go back to events. And we're going to look at the Sunday worship. We've got, let's see, 11 o'clock contemporary worship. When you click on this event's already been created. You can click on a new event and create it. It allows you to fill out the typical details of an event like you might on your Google Calendar or an Outlook, but there's a few additional things here for Church360, and one of those is calendars. So we've got worship calendar. We're going to go ahead and add in the communion calendar here. And that way, if I want to see just events where communion is there that I've tagged in a way as a communion event, I can see that there. Now down here, we have attendance, communion served, offering taken. Those turn on this event in certain areas of the software. And so we're going to go ahead and click communion taken there, or communion served and offering taken there as well. But this will feed into reporting, and we'll look at that a little bit as we get into people. So you have all of the other typical things like making an all-day event or repeating event. Those are over here. We're not going to get into that today, but I wanted to show that calendar thing because that'll come back into play later on. All right, so we'll click Save. All right, now we've added that. I'm going to turn off all of my events and go to Communion, and you'll see it just as that event over here. But if I also click on Worship, all my worship events, including that one, coming over here because it's on both calendars. All right, wanted to clarify that. Let's jump into attendance, because that is the first time that the church is going to know somebody is there. Like we talked before, coming to an event is the way that a person begins their interaction with the church. Attendance is how the church knows that they're there. Now, I know many congregations don't take individual attendance. We support that, encourage that, because it gives you better information about your members. And so that's what we're going to look at here today. So the communion and worship event that we had here, contemporary worship over there. When we click on it, you can see that up here. We've got our little beacon telling us how to search. We can go through and mark everybody who's attended. If we click the family name, it marks everybody in that family as attended. If we click on just a few people in there, not everyone will be marked as attended, just the right ones. Anybody who's communed, if you click the chalice, it shows that they have communed here. And to make it easy on you, if you just click the chalice, that person will also be marked as attended, because it's really hard to commune at that worship service if you're not physically present. So we built in some of those quick tips. There's also ways of getting using keyboard shortcuts to make it go faster. You can tab through it, click the space bar. We have keyboard shortcuts Q, W, E for marking them as attended, communed, or a regular attender. There's a lot of those helpful tips. We won't get into all of that into too much detail, but this can be a tedious task. And obviously in the church office, there's no end to the amount of things that have to be done. This is a fantastic task for a volunteer to do. Now, if you don't take individual attendance at your church, you may be wondering, well, how do you even get this information? There's a variety of different resources out there. I recommend either doing attendance cards or having an attendance book in each row or pew, not just one book for everybody, because then the line gets too long to sign in. I did a live video on Facebook a few weeks back. We've got blog posts on that, how to take individual attendance. But the main thing is if you are not taking attendance because of the amount of effort, utilize volunteers who have the time to do that and the willingness to do that. And if you're using something where people are filling out a card, they can even do that from home. You can send them with the card, the completed cards, and they can do this from home. So that's one of the ways that a volunteer can help. What's great about doing individual attendance, though, is that this is where you can start adding people into the database. And that's where we're going to head next. So I've created, I've outlined a fake family, meaning this information is not real. I went to fake name generator to build this, so don't worry, I'm not using anybody's personal information. If it is real information, it's only by coincidence. So the first person that we're going to put in here is Haley Whitaker. And so you may see, oops, I'll spell her name right. You may see her name come up in the attendance, and when you search for her, nobody shows up. Well, if we hit enter, let me make sure, there we go. She is now added to the database. So you can see there, Haley Whitaker has been added. Now, we could also put in her husband, Kevin. Oops, and he's not there, so we'll add him in. And then their son, Mason. Now, as we type them in and hit enter, they get added. Now you'll notice here they're all added on different lines, and that's because it doesn't have the logic built in to assume that everybody in the last name is part of the same family, and that's intentional. We can't assume that, because even if you have a lot of people with the same last name, you wouldn't want them all connected in the same household because there's no guarantee for that. So I think about things like baptisms. When you have a whole family with a lot of the same last names coming in, you can't assume they're all together. So we'll add them together in just a second. The important thing here is to note that you can add people while taking attendance. So your volunteer can get that process started without that having to be somebody else adding it in and then coming back and saying, okay, now that they're in the database, you can go ahead and mark them as attended. So that's the first step. But that leads us into updating people information. So that's what we're going to go here to people for. And this view is similar in that you have a search field up at the top. You can actually group it by different ways: individuals, households, givers, marriages. Over on the far right, you have some ways to get the data out or in, upload or download, print, save as a report. We'll talk about a little bit of that later on. You also have what we call our Smart Group Selector, which allows you to look at these different lists of people. And we'll talk about tags in just a minute. So right now it's set for everybody. We have columns there, which are very similar to calendars, but we've got a little bit more in there, all this kind of data. All right, but what we want to do is find the Whitaker family. All right, oops, looks like it's going, there we go. I'm gonna turn off these beacons. As soon as I look at them, they're done. the flashing can kind of distract me. So it's always good to go through and learn about these different areas. All right, so here's the Whitaker family. We're going to start with Haley. All right, there is Haley Whitaker. She's a non-member. When we entered her, we didn't know anything else but her name. And so it's all blank. We get to fill that in now. So we know she's a non-member. If I click on her name, I can go up here and just say we know her middle name is starts with an A. So we could put in the title if we want, Mrs. Haley Whitaker. And that information stays there. Oops, I hit enter too soon. So Mrs. Haley Whitaker. It doesn't all show just because that's not always relevant. We'll go and click on the Whitaker household address. Actually, let me back up a second. When I click on the link itself, it takes me to this household view. There it is, the Whitaker household. And it's just Haley right now. From here, we'll go ahead and add in her husband and her son. So there's Kevin Whitaker, and then we'll add in Mason Whitaker. And now they're all in the same households. They were each created with their own household, but those households are now gone because nobody's in them. So we can also rearrange this. So maybe you want to go with the traditional husband, wife, children order. You can do that just by dragging and dropping, clicking on those little dots by it. All right, let's go ahead and add an address in. And this is the kind of stuff that can take quite a bit of time and is good for a volunteer to do. May not be the same volunteer who is entering the attendance, but that's okay. The more the merrier. All right, so I hope this is a fake street. I know all of that is real, but I don't believe there's a Court Street there. Well, maybe. The map shows something for me. Looks like it's just estimating around Jack in the Box and Taco Bell. Very good. All right, I can also go in here and add a phone number. Actually, I'm going to leave that out. Most people don't have home phone numbers. I'm going to put that as Haley's cell phone number. So I'm going to leave just about everything here except for the picture. So we'll click here, and somehow, I won't say how, let's say we got a name or a picture from the Whitaker family after their first visit to church. That's probably not going to happen, but for demonstration purposes, it'll work out really well if I do that today. So we're going to upload the Whitaker family photo. Maybe we searched and found them on Facebook or something like that. So we can put that in there. Beautiful family photo. And we'll close that. So now let's go over and go to Haley Whitaker. Now she doesn't have a photo yet, but we can do that same thing. We'll just upload that same photo. But because we can kind of assume who she is from this mix, I'm going to crop down and go and just show her photo there. Hate to cut out her son Mason, but we'll zoom in and we'll crop. And it'll take a second while it crops the photo and saves that version of it. And then Haley will have her own photo there. Very good. All right, now we added her husband and child, Kevin and Mason, to the household, but they're not there yet on the family record. And that's because we view households and families as two different things. Certainly in the broad sense of family, everybody in your household probably is your family, even if they're not related to you, even if they're just friends. But because in a church, you'll often have family members who are not in the same household. Maybe you have grandma and grandpa in one household, the kids in another, and the grandkids, might be grown and in their own household. So you might have these different levels. You can still connect them all here. So we'll go ahead and add Kevin Whitaker as her spouse. And we'll add Mason Whitaker as her child. And we've built that relationship. Now I can click on Kevin, and it's going to automatically have Haley on there. And then I can go in here and say, all right, well, Mason is also his child. We don't make the assumptions if they aren't true. Now, if Mason had a sibling and we put that under both Haley and Kevin, it would assume that that sibling is Mason's sibling because they have the same parents. Wherever we can assume, we do to save you time. But whenever it's not a safe assumption, we don't do it. All right, let's go back to Haley. We'll add in her phone number, which I had copied before. Mark that as a cell phone number. Click out of there. We'll copy her email address. Put that in there. There we go. All right, over here, I'll put that she is a female. We don't know her ethnic group, and that's okay. Many denominational reports require that, and so we put that in there. Now, her birthday. We know her birthday because we found out from her somehow in this fictitious scenario. But let's say you don't know her birthday. Maybe you just know that she was born in 1985, or maybe you just know the date. You can do partial dates here too if you wanted to. But we're going to go ahead and put it in. She was born on March 21st, 1990. All right, and we'll mark that in, and now it'll tell us, it'll do the math for you, that she is 27 years old. That's a nice thing for those of you who can't do mental math. I'm so tied into my spreadsheets that I have a lot of trouble doing that mental math, so it's good that it'll put that up there for me. All right, and then what I can do is maybe I know exactly where she works and what her job is there. Well, as I go in here, there's not a place to put that. Now I've got that she is a human resources clerk at our Calvary and Associates. So I could put in a tag that she is a human resources clerk. And a tag is kind of like a post-it note or some kind of static descriptor. It either means it's true or it's not. And as soon as it's not true, we can remove the tag. Now that's one way of doing that. And for things like hobbies, that are really good. So maybe she really enjoys gardening. I can add gardening as a tag. Maybe she enjoys, let's say, theater. I could put that as a tag. You know, next time you have a dinner theater at your congregation, she would be a perfect person to call. You can add all of that in. Maybe she is looking for a church home. That's a great tag that once she becomes a member, you could remove, but then you can easily find everybody who's looking for a church home. Now, some things like job, either employee or occupation, probably you don't need to create a tag for because it's going to be very different for each person. Unless you have a lot of human resources clerks in there, it's a good descriptor of Haley, but not a good thing for looking up information. That's where we have custom fields. So if we go up to settings and general settings, it's going a little slow today. Here we go. We have person custom fields and household custom fields. And we're going to put in occupation, if I could type. And that's going to be a text field. You could also do a date or a list. Those are different field types. And you can restrict the visibility to different permission groups. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and add employer, and I'm going to also put school, employer or school as a text. Maybe I should spell employer right. There we go. Employer or school. And that allows you to have this one central place to track the employer and the school. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that'll refresh and kind of lock that in place. It's created those custom fields for me. You'll notice that we have these verses or hymn verses or Bible verses up. It kind of gives you something to reflect on in the case that it's slow. All right, we'll go back to people and we're going to go find Haley again. And you can see now her picture shows up there as well. All right, so Haley Whitaker, now I can say enter occupation or employer slash school, or both. We're going to do both. Human resources clerk at our Calvary. All right, very good. So that is all the information I know about Haley. I can go in and fill out a lot of the same kind of information for Kevin. I can go in here and add a picture of Kevin and crop that as well. Now, the important reason for doing this is not just to have the information, but as you start talking about utilizing volunteers, having this kind of relevant information about the members of your church will help you find those volunteers. That goes back to this idea of stewardship, where the more you know about people allows you to find the right thing to ask them to volunteer for. So if you were looking for somebody to enter in information into the database, and you find somebody who is a human resources clerk, that's probably a very good person to ask to volunteer. Now, they may be working full-time, you know that by the occupation, but that's the person who's that kind of skill level that can help you enter data and make sure that it's correct. So there's a lot of good reasons to keep this in there, but when you talk about encouraging volunteers, having this information is one of those first stepping stones to utilizing these volunteers. And that's why I put on the outline that the Board of Stewardship might be the people who fill this out. You could have, you know, a new member visit with somebody from the Board of Stewardship that says, I really want to connect you in with our church. What kind of things interest you? So as you do that, as you enter this information in, oops, I don't know why his picture didn't come across. Sometimes this stuff is a little bit slow to update in the session. It's also because I have this webinar broadcast going on that uses up a lot of my system resources, and so it's going a little slow. But we'll go ahead, and really the whole reason I picked this picture was to get this cropped photo of the aptly named Mason. I don't know if that's his name, but he's a cute kid. And so I wanted to make sure to get him in there. Look at that face. There we go. All right. So we'll go through it now. The image is working over there. There's that family situation. So we've got everybody who are members in there. Their data is updated as much as possible. But as we get to know the Whitakers more, I'm sure we can add more information in there. So we talked about tags a little bit. Let's talk about smart groups as well. So let's go back to Haley where we have those tags. Talked about maybe a human resources clerk being good at entering data. So we could put data entry. Yeah, that's already been one we've used before. So we'll put data entry in there. Now when we go back to people, this is that main view that has all of that information listed. You can look at the different columns and see what's there. If we remove a bunch of this and just go to tags, you can see that people have these different tags, and some of it's involvement, some of it, like inactive is a type of tag. You might want to exclude inactive members when you're looking for volunteers. What you could also do, though, is create a smart group, which is a dynamic listing. I'm talking about tags being static, meaning they don't change unless you change them. Dynamic could be based on other things. So we could say, find anybody who's living. That's always a good way to start out. Anybody who is a member, and anyone whose tags contain, and you could do several of these. You could say, computer programming, data entry, maybe, we don't have too many in there, ushers. You could put all those in there and get a collection of people who meet any one of those criteria. So any one of those tags, and now we have that listing. So that's a good list just based on a few different tags. From here we can do things like select all and email them. We utilize a thing called an email relay tool that lets you send a bulk email all at once. You may want to download a directory. Let's say that somebody has asked you for a listing of all the people with their contact information. You could do that and even put in their photo and just say, possible volunteers. And what that'll do, it'll take a second because I included a number of different fields. It'll put together a directory that can easily be printed and is formatted to contain the information that you want. And so like all this contact information and photo for that specific group of people that we've already selected. That will give you something that could easily be printed and handed to your ministry leader and say, hey, why don't you try talking to Dave Abbott here? He would probably be a good one to join your ministry. So that's one way of doing that. If it takes too long, and this is seeming to go quite a while, it will actually run in the background. And when it's ready to go, I'll get a little notification up here that tells me it's ready to go. Now I could also just print this list and it'll take me to the browser where it's formatted nicely. It's not in the exact same way as I might want out of a directory, but it'll work. So that's one way of doing it. All right, so that's not done yet. I don't know why that's taking so long. That always happens when I'm live. All right, let's move into the next step. So we talked about being able to identify information about the Whitakers to help them get involved, how it would be a great thing for a volunteer to enter that in, because it can be time consuming. Well, one of the next steps that you might want to do, and let me go through here and go to everyone. I'll just put all the columns back out again. Oops. There we go, so that we can find the Whitakers. Oops. There they are. So one thing that you might want to do, and I highly recommend, is have somebody meet with them, like a pastoral visit. Or it could be like the Board of Elders. I know that when we get new people who come into the church, one of the reasons we take attendance is so we can see who the visitors are. The elders collect those cards. We review them and say, okay, well, the Whitakers are here. I don't know them. But based on where I picked up the cards, I can kind of identify that that's them. I'm going to go talk to them after the service. And if that's after the service, or maybe you see their contact information, call them and ask if you can meet them for coffee and just tell a little bit about the church, you can add that information under their history. So we'll go here. This is under Haley's, and we can say add a pastoral visit. Now I've got my fictional name, Kent Williams, here. I could say that this was a welcome visit. And it was like, we've got these different things where you can mark them. They're kind of like tags. We didn't call it tags because it serves a different purpose. But maybe it was first time visitors. Add that in there. And then I can add a note and say, had a great conversation. They're considering coming back. And say, okay, well, we're going to show that to, well, certainly to pastor. And we're going to show it to the administrators and also the elders. And you can pick and choose those different groups and who to share it with. And so we'll click Save. Now, this is something that I do all the time as a member of the Board of Elders. As I make phone calls, as I make shut-in visits, I'll add that information in here. And what's great about it is it not only helps me keep track of when was the last time I talked to Haley, it also helps those in the church office see, okay, well, Peter already went and took communion to the Whitakers, and so I know they can't come to church right now, but I know at least they are receiving the body and blood. And so that will allow the pastor to say, okay, let me see who else hasn't received it recently since the Whitakers are taken care of. That's one way that volunteers help. And at church it may be different how the Board of Elders serves. But it's a great way to allow volunteers to communicate back to the church office any of those interactions. Because if we rely only on the church office to do that, they're going to get overwhelmed. And so that's why delegating this to volunteers is great. Now up here under settings, you can also go in and see pastoral visits at a whole level. And so here we go. We have Haley Whitaker, Kent Williams, first time visitors, welcome. You can see all these other visits that have occurred as well. So you can enter them in here. You just can't put the notes in. So I always recommend doing it from that people view. The last thing that I want to point out is, as well is that you can do this on your phone. So I'm going to use this. Bear with me while I switch my screen around. And we'll just refresh that real quickly. Let's go fit to window. All right, so, okay, good, that's showing up. Okay, I had to look up there on my audience view. So if you go to Church360 Members on your phone, you get this view, which is very different, obviously. But you can still search, and we'll go to the Whitakers. And we can click on Haley, and it shows that information. And I can go down and add visits or notes as well here. So if I wanted to just add a note, let's say she wasn't actually visited, but I had a conversation with her, I can say, I can put that in here and still choose who can see it. So that's one thing to think about is how can you do this, but not from the church office, not from a computer, when you're visiting people. I know that many pastors will do this in the car in the hospital parking lot. And I've heard that from my pastor. I've heard that from other customers that say, I really will forget about this if I wait till I get back to the church office. I don't want to do it while I'm in front of the person. But as soon as I get back to my car, before I even start it up, I sit down and I enter in that visit so that I can record that record there. And that's just a good practice to get into, whether you're a pastor or an elder or, the assimilation coordinator. If you're visiting somebody, you can enter this in right there so you don't lose that information. All right, let's talk about, we talked about smart groups before. Let me go ahead and turn off that. We'll refresh. The navigation changes if it's on a smartphone, and so you don't have quite as much. We talked about putting together smart lists, smart groups, which are lists of people that are dynamically created. Oops, let me close out of this thing down here. There we go. The other thing you can do, though, with that information is you can create different reports. So if I go here to reports, it takes me to this view, which is quite a bit different. I have a number of reports here that are out of the box, but I'm going to go click New and say Attendance. And maybe my attendance report is for anybody who's looking for a church home. So I'll go up here and go down to that, looking for a church home. And it's probably only going to be Haley. And let's see. Oops, I don't know why she's not showing up there. Wonder if I have to refresh since. So the great thing about doing this live. That's on. Well, here we go. Looking for a church home, including those who didn't attend. So when did her attendance come into play? Well, I'll have to figure out why she's not there. Let's go back up to attendance real quick. I wonder if I checked her off. Yep, somehow that didn't get in there. There we go. We'll go back to reports. Sorry about that. It's always fun when things don't go exactly as planned. I'm sure you have no experience with that in the church. There we go. Okay, so there's her attendance. I'll have to look into why that didn't go across the first time. May have been too quick after I moved things. All right, so her attendance, that's pulled up by a tag looking for a church home. I can also go in here and add other criteria if I wanted to, just like on the people view. But what then I can save, oops, we'll go to looking. What I can do is I can save this report and it'll give me the details. All I do is hit save and say attendance by those looking for a church home. And I'll save that report, and I can click and drag backwards, and it'll be in the last 3 months. I'll save that. Attendance in the last 3 months by those looking for a church home. The first one was fixed dates. We'll save that so that anytime I can go back to reports and click on that. And it'll take me right back to that view and give me that nice title as well. And so then I can see those attendance records. You can do that by a variety of other things, including the people view. So if you wanted to create a contact list of those same people, you go here to New Report, New People Report. We'll change it out so that this is, we'll do their photo, email address, phone number, and we'll filter it by looking for a church home. All right, now think about this. You put together this list, we'll save it as a report. Every week, you could print this out and say, hand it to your volunteers who are in charge of these home visits. Actually, let's go ahead and add address to that. And then say, attended worship ever in the last 7 days, and their tag is looking for a church home. There we go. That's going to be a little bit better. So we could even say that like recent visitors at worship is that criteria for the SMART group. And the contact information is my columns. And now I can save this as my report of visitor follow-ups. Click Save there. And there we go. And I forgot to go back to that. Here's my directory. Oops, too many things there. Up here's my directory. You could do a directory like that and hand it out or even email it to your team. And let's see if this will show up on the screen. I'm opening a file. Sometimes when I go into, Word is showing up. By the way, I know I'm running a little bit over on time. I don't have any questions in the queue right now, so I'm going to go past that 50 minutes. I've only got 2 more things to show. Actually 3, sorry. 3 more things to show. And my Word to see. Even that is taking a little while. All right. Let's get out of the preview mode, and I can just show how that formatted directory looks. See? Just what we were going for before, all the contact information, but on a few sheets and not in a grid like on the screen. So you could do that same kind of thing for your visitors worship group. All right, I'm going, like I said, a little over time. Let me show you one other thing for volunteers, and then I'll show you how to manage those volunteers within the system. So offerings and offering entry is a great thing for the Board of Finance to help with. It's also good for office volunteers to do as well, where when you click on offerings, you can go and create a new batch, pick the date, let's say it was for Sunday at Contemporary Worship, add that in here. And not only can you enter offerings in by name, so if Dave and Sue Abbott, put a check in there, check number 103, for $100 for the general fund, you can do that. You can also look by offering envelope number. And if you want, we can set the permissions so that you can't even see the names. You can just see the numbers or the names in case somebody just puts it in as a check. So you can type in 172. And they had an envelope with cash in it for $50 to the general fund. And you can go through your offerings pretty quickly. But if you're a large church, it'll still take time, and that's a volunteer task. So, one of the first things I did at my church when we introduced Church360 Members was I sat down with the volunteer tellers, as they call it, and walked them through the process of entering offerings. And all of them were older adults, in their 60s, 70s. I even had somebody in their 80s, and just walked them through that process of adding offerings in. And that was a great way for them to share their time and their talents of attention to detail and data entry. Even older adults are used to data entry at this point, and they have the time to do it to help you out. So that is another way to utilize volunteers. But before we go any farther, I want to highlight the way that you help people get started on this. So we're going to go down to settings and roles and logins. All of these tasks are great for volunteers to do if they have access. And I'm sure you are just as hesitant as everybody else is about giving access to this kind of data without kind of restricting some of it. And that's what we created roles for. So what you're seeing today is the administrator role. Everything is accessible. I need to show that for the demo, so you get everything there. But you can mark this down even smaller so that people can just enter attendance and see basic information about people, or maybe be able to see it but not edit that at all. So read-only rights to edit. You may want your elders to be able to edit the information but not see offerings. There's no need for the elders to see how much people are giving when they're providing care. Your financial secretary may need to see the offerings but doesn't need to see the attendance because that's not relevant to that person. So you can create these different roles based all around different areas of the software. Then you can go in and go to logins and pick the roles based on the people. And so maybe Sue Abbott needs to be an attendance entry clerk, but she also happens to be on the Board of Finance, and so you give her the financial secretary role. And she just does both. She would get the sum of both of those parts. And so no matter how many roles you have, and you can have those unlimited, you can have as many roles as you want in a person, and they get the sum of the most access. So it really lets you not just narrow down what people can do, but give everybody just the right information. So that hits all of my primary targets. Let me go back here and show that. In using volunteers in the office, we talked about how to enter attendance. We talked about how you might use good stewardship principles by putting information about people into the membership records, how the Board of Elders can help put visits in and things that might fall in the line of pastoral care. And the Board of Finance, we briefly touched on entering offerings. That's one of those things that we can go into more details on. I can show how to print contribution statements. We're just running short on time. So those are the four main areas. I hope you received ideas on how your volunteers can help you out, because honestly, none of this stuff has to be done by the church staff. You just need people who have a little bit of time, and that's all. That's what volunteering is all about. All right, a few things. If you are brand new to Church360 Members and you'd like to get started, you could start a free 30-day trial today, have full access to everything, start playing around, entering your information, giving that a try. I do encourage you that if you'd like to subscribe, do so by February 28th. We're offering our regular sale of saving $199. We waive the startup fee. I know many of our customers who are here today took advantage of that the last time we offered that. But I want to put my contact information on the screen one last time, because I went through things rather quickly. There's a lot more I can cover. I could talk about Church360 Members literally all day, and I have before. We'll offer training sessions and things like that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, not just from a, if you're a new customer, but if you're an existing customer who is looking for other ways of utilizing Church360 Members and say, here's what I'd like to do. I don't know how to do that. I'd love to hear that from you, because there may be things we haven't heard of before. There may be things we have, and we've got creative solutions for that. You could talk to me or any of our software consultants about that. I'd be happy to walk through that with you. We also have our support information that I showed before within the app that you can reach out that way. So with that, I'm going to ask, are there any questions? I'd be happy to provide the answers. If not, we'll wrap up in just a moment. I'll give you guys a minute to enter in those questions, but I thank you for being here today. And I hope that you learned how Church360 Members is flexible enough to allow you to do the things you need to do, but not necessarily have you be the one who's doing it. Utilize those volunteers that are eager to serve, but just are looking for ways to do that. It's been a great experience to visit churches and see how volunteers take things off the plate of the paid church staff so that they can focus on their primary tasks, which are communicating the gospel. All right, so I've got a question from Sylvia. Under the board, we'd like to know, under the Board of Finances, is there anywhere where we can put expenses? Well, that would actually go back. It's not within Church360 Members. Let me go back to that screen here. It's within Church360 Ledger. That allows you to manage your chart of accounts, track your income and expenses, your assets and your liabilities. What Church360 Members allows you to do is put in your offerings, which would be part of your income, and that would go into your assets, but it doesn't track expenses. That's a different program, but we do have that option. And if you're interested in learning more, I'll be leading a webinar on Church360 Ledger this coming Thursday in a couple of days. And so I'd be happy to walk you through that then. You can sign up on our website, and you may have even received an email about that. So we'll be talking about Ledger at that time. So sorry I don't have the answer for you today, but that discussion is coming. So make sure you tune in on Thursday. I'll be happy to show that to you. All right, it looks like that may be our only question for today, and that's probably good because I am just about out of time. So thank you very much for joining me. Let me go ahead and put my contact information up one last time. Again, my name is Peter Frank, and I'm thankful that you were here to join me today, and I'd love to talk to you more if you have any questions. But other than that, we'll wrap up. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.